Hey everyone, this is Tara Lynn from Paint, Rinse, Repeat. Welcome to Arctic Aurora. I'm super excited to paint these Arctic polar bears with you with the beautiful Aurora lights behind them. Before we get started, I will go over the supply list. We will transfer the image together. I don't usually do that, but every once in a while I like to do that so people can see how it's done, and then we'll go on from there. So first we've got the supply list here. As you can see, I'm working with used canvas. I don't like to waste them. This has a design on it that was from a previous lesson, and I'm just going to go right over the top. I'm going to show you how to transfer with black transfer paper. You can use whatever size canvas you want. There are outlines for a variety of sizes. So before we get started, let's go over the colors though. So I've got bright blue, cobalt blue, cerulean blue, any of those are fine. I've got black, neon pink, phthalo green, white, so those are the colors. You're also going to want paper towels, a glass of water to clean your brushes. Variety of paint brushes is fine. I most often use flats for this in a small round. So you'll need a palette to put your paint on, a pencil, and that is pretty much it. All right, so let's move on to the first step, which is transferring this image. So I'll be using black transfer paper. You can also paint your canvas black, and you could use white transfer paper. That's an option as well. You could also use chalk for a transfer method. You could use pencil for a transfer method. There's lots of different ways to get this transferred. But I'm going to go ahead and use this black transfer paper. You're going to print off your outline, whichever size you choose to use, and you're just going to line it up and then tape it together. So regardless what size canvas you use, there are a variety of different size outlines. So go ahead and tape it together. We are going to put the transfer paper shiny side down. You can see I've used this a million times. You can use it over and over and over. That's why transfer paper is so great. So put it shiny side down. You're going to center your outline on your canvas. And then as you draw, you're going to trace right over the top of that. It's going to transfer the image onto your canvas. So I'm using a pencil to do this. There are different ways to transfer. You could certainly use the pencil method or the chalk method, which replaces the transfer paper. So if you flip it over, you can still see some of that, the printed outline. You can scribble over the top of that with a pencil or with chalk, and then that acts as your transfer paper. So you would put that side towards the canvas and then trace your outline same way, and it'll transfer. It'll be a little lighter. If you use pencil, it'll be removable if you use chalk, so just be cautious. But basically, same process. You go ahead and transfer this. You can do the lines at the top. I'm actually going to skip them because we're just going to paint that black anyway, and that's super easy to do. So right now it's a little difficult to see, but my image is transferred. I'm going to go over the top of this with a Sharpie so you can easily see it on camera. You can go over it with a Sharpie at home as well if you want to make sure that it stays visible as we do layers, but that is completely optional. And there we have it. There's the bears. You can see the shape of these bears if you have to freehand it. It's kind of like if you were to curve your hands. So it's kind of what I did when I was drawing them and sketching them out originally. So if you don't have a transfer method, you can always sketch it that way as well. Most of this, you'll see the outline that from my previous canvas, I'm just going to paint over with black. So I'm not worried about that. I like to have a sample in front of me. That's why I always put one on the video here, and I put one on the supply list. I'm just going to fold this in half and prop it in front of me so that I can refer back to it. Alrighty, let's get painting. So for the first step, I'm going to paint most of this background black. So up here at the top, all this is going to be black. We're going to pull black down in through the water as well. So go ahead and grab some black paint. We're going to leave our polar bears white. If you paint it on a black canvas, it's okay that they're black. That is not a problem. We're putting a coat of color on those anyway. So whether you started with a white canvas or started with a black canvas, that's fine. So get a nice big fat flat brush, and we're just going to paint this entire background black. We are pulling the black down also by the water. I'm going to leave the moon white, but you can always just paint right over it. It's not difficult to paint a circle, but I'm going to pull this black paint all the way down between the bears to the bottom. While I have this black paint out, I'm going to go ahead and paint the edges of my canvas just so it's nice and consistent. Sometimes I wait till the end and I'll just paint it with the leftover color. Neither way is right or wrong, but I've got enough black paint now out on my palette that I'm going to go ahead and do that. So that's what I'm going to be doing for the next few steps. Feel free to fast forward through this part if you're not going to do that, or if you're not there yet, feel free to pause. That's the beauty of YouTube, is you can pause, fast forward, rewind at any point during the video. All right, for the next step, I'm going to get out some of my bright blue. We're going to use kind of a lot of this. All right, so I'm going to clean off the same big flat brush that I used for my background. All right, with this blue, we are going to start with the bears, and then we're going to do some of the color in the sky. Or I'm going to start with the sky, and then we'll do the bears, and then do more color in the sky. All right, so I've got a flat brush, and I've got a band of deeper color at the bottom, kind of in between the polar bears and the brightest of the northern lights. So I'm going to take this flat brush, I've got some of this blue on it, and the movement is going to be up and down. It's going to be a very jagged motion. So I'm going to show you on the back of the canvas what I mean. So as we put this in, it's going to be this kind of motion, up and down, large strokes, small strokes, just vary it. Okay, you can kind of go up like this, you can go down, but play with it. It almost reminds me of a heart monitor at the hospital. So kind of embrace that feeling. That's what we're doing. I'm going to start here on the left, and I am going to make these up and down jaggedy motions. And the black of the canvas is going to take a lot of this away. As it dries, it's going to... Now I start right by this polar bear, and of course these northern lights can go any which way. I'm also going to start, I'm going to leave a gap. I'm going to start down here by this guy and just kind of build these two pieces up together. And it's just an up and down motion. Now you don't want to go too thick with your paint because some of this you do want to disappear a little bit. This is the darker area of the Northern Lights. Kind of blends in with the background a little bit. Okay. And you can add, you know, bands of color kind of wherever. So there's no rules. I might add just a little bit up here at the top. Maybe a little bit might peek through here. If I paint over this, it gets hidden, no big deal. But don't feel like you're committed to just one section or the same section that I have. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is come down here. Now I've got a large flat brush. For this, I'm going to switch to a smaller flat brush. Use whatever works for you, okay? So I've got the bright blue on here, and I am going to paint my moon bright blue. And then around my moon, I'm going to kind of just paint in some brush strokes that work their way out from the moon. And let that paint thin as it goes outward from that moon, okay? So up closer to the moon, it's a little brighter blue. Then we have a line where the horizon is on this painting. So if you know where that mark was, that's fine. I'm gonna draw my line back in. So here's my horizon line. And we've got some bright blue. And I'm just gonna move kind of back and forth in a left to right movement and put a nice thin coat of this. So we want a lot of that black to show through, and as it dries, you can see up here it's kind of getting a little darker. And just pull that downwards. Right, then we are going to fill our polar bears in with this bright blue color. And I will be able to see, since I did my outlines in Sharpie, I will be able to see my outlines for the ears and the side of the face and such. If you have a hard time seeing where your outlines are after you get that blue on there, I can still see pencil lines through it, so you should be able to see through it if you've used a transfer, but I will guide you as well as we get to those future steps. But right now I want these two bears to be nice and blue. All right, so we've got some nice blue bears. We've got some marks in the sky. We've got some blue around the moon. I'm going to switch back to my smaller flat brush. And now I need some white on my palette. All right, so with this small brush, I'm going to come through, and it's not real small, but I'm going to add a layer of white right on top of this moon. Some of that blue is wet, and that's fine. I just blend it in. Doesn't matter, because once you get the shape of your moon nice and cleaned up, what I'm going to do is just grab some of this blue right on my paintbrush and just kind of tap it in there, kind of smush it around to give that moon texture. And I'll move this up close to the camera in just a moment and show you what this texture looks like. So it's just kind of a smushing motion. You just kind of want to get some marks in there. That's pretty much it, okay? Now I've got blue and white on my brush. That is perfect. That's exactly what I want. So now I'm going to kind of go around this moon and just smear some lighter color. Give that moon a brighter halo. I'm going to wipe that off, go back into this blue, maybe swoop some more blue in there. Down here, a lot of this is all dry for me, has darkened. So where the moon has a reflection, I'm going to add a little more of this bright blue kind of right down the middle. And by layering it, the second layer will be much brighter. And so we want it to be wider up close to the horizon, and it'll thin down a little bit as you get deeper or lower, okay? Then I'm going to grab a little bit of white. I don't want a lot, but I am going to just blend in a little bit of white kind of up here at the higher area, and then right down the middle, just a few strokes of white down into, oops, that's a lot. That's not as much as I wanted, but that's okay. Just kind of blending this here and there. This is, you know, reflection in that water. Moon glow. All right. And before I move on to another color, I'm going to dip back into, I still have my small brush, my small flat brush, dip back into that bright blue. And I'm going to come up here, and in some parts, I'm going to add just a little bit of brightness. So a second coat, not over the entire thing. I want there to be areas that are brighter and areas that are darker. But for the most part, this blue stays pretty dark. All right, I'm going to flip my painting upside down because I'm going to work on the sky next. And that is going to be up at the top, and it's just easier to flip. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going to get some phthalo green on my palette and some neon pink on my palette. And again, this is where you can kind of change up colors. If you want to make your green a little more lime, you could certainly use a brighter lime green or mix a little yellow into that. Totally your call. But I'm going to get a large flat brush and I'm going to dip straight into this phthalo green. And I'm going to create a band that goes across with this phthalo. And some of it can overlap the blue, that's fine. But you can decide what your shape is, how much black you want to show through. Now this phthalo is very transparent. I know that. This is the darker color. We will add some highlights to this. You decide on your pattern. I honestly am not overthinking this because the northern lights change. If you ever look at them, they're never the same for very long. All right, next I'm going to get a little bit of white on my brush. You can dip it into the phthalo or you can just work with the wetness on your palette depending on how bright you want it to be. But I'm going to come through, flat brush, same size, and I'm just going to pull some of this white in this green. And it's going to change up this green on me. And if you go too white, just dip into a little phthalo. But it's kind of cool to have areas where the green is lighter in some areas, darker in others. So don't be afraid to just let the paint kind of decide what it wants. So you decide where you want your green, where you want those lightest areas of green, where you want your black to show through. And when you are done, we're going to do the same thing with the neon pink or your bright pink. So I'm going to start with a clean brush and just my bright pink. Now, bright colors or neon colors are pretty transparent, so a lot of this I'm not even going to see until I come back through with some white. It's going to really fade out on me. And I'm just going all the way across. And then same thing, gonna dip in a little bit of white. And then this is where your brightest pink is gonna be. Now I can flip this around, and I will hold this kind of up towards the camera there so you can see I've got some areas where it's just that first layer of phthalo where the black shows through and it's nice and deep. Same thing with the pink. I've got areas where that neon around the edges is just letting that black show through. And then when I smudge in that white layer, that's where the magic happens. It adds a nice bright layer to that. Now in this painting, my bright blue is much brighter than in my sample. That's fine. If that bothers you, you can get a little black and you can tone that down. I'm kind of digging it, but I'll show you what it looks like to tone it down. You do the exact same thing. You would just get that background color and you could pull some of this black up in there and kind of just tone it down a little bit. Totally optional. You don't have to do that. I kind of like where it is. So if you need areas where you kind of want to clean it up and just get rid of some color, you're not committed to any of this. Once it's dry, you can play with it. This is your painting and your Aurora, and you can make it however you want to. So I am happy with my Northern Lights. I'm going to move on to the next step here in just a second. You can finalize yours. If you need to pause the video at any point to kind of work on this, go ahead and do that. There's no stress in painting. This should be a fun, easy peasy painting. And remember, your Northern Lights can absolutely be different from mine. They do not have to be the same. They change from second to second, so you are never committed to exactly what I do. All right, the next thing we're going to do here, I'm going to add a layer of white on my polar bears. So I need a nice clean brush. A little trick, a little painting trick. So a lot of people think you need to have clean water in order to not get things muddy. You really don't need clean water as much as you need a dry brush. So after you clean it, just make sure it's dry. So I'm going to come through and I'm going to add a layer of blue on both bears. Now I am aware, if you can see the outlines, you're probably going to lose them at this point. But that's okay. We'll walk through where to put everything. If you don't want to lose those outlines, just paint the bear. So for example, around the ears, if you don't want to lose the shape of that ear, just go in the same pattern and you'll be able to tell by the brush strokes where things are. So for example, here's a layer of white in the middle of my ear. Okay. But for the most part, this whole baby's getting a coat of white. And I don't want it to be like so completely heavy that I can't see through it. So a thin coat. We don't want this to be really heavy. If you're using heavy bodied paint, thin it just a little bit. So what you can't see real well on camera, and that's just because of how cameras work, is I can see through this a little bit. See how I can, it's almost like a base coat. See how I can kind of see through that? That's what I'm going for. So when I say not thick, I am covering all the blue, but I'm not covering it so thick that it's gloppy and I can't see through that there was blue underneath. And I know that my nose is black, so I don't really even have to mess with my nose. All right, so just showing you what it looks like. So here's one bear. See how you can kind of see through it a little bit. So I'm just using regular white paint, and I just made sure that as I brushed it on, I did a really, really thin coat. And we do have another layer to do on this, or we're going to do some shading with the blue. So the beauty of this is it doesn't really have to be perfect. Those little imperfections are kind of what make this look like a polar bear, honestly. And fun fact, let me know, for those of you who are watching either live with me or watching on the replay, let me know, did you know that polar bear fur is clear? Polar bears do not have white fur. They have transparent fur. Let me know if you knew that. And my son told me today, I don't know if this is true or not, I didn't look it up, but he told me today that if you shave a polar bear, not that anybody would be shaving a polar bear, but if a polar bear lost all of its fur, that their skin underneath all that fur is actually black. Isn't that fun? Things are not always as they appear. All right, so I've got my thin coat of white on both bears. So this is what it looks like. It's okay to kind of thin that out with your brush as you're painting, scratch that out. I did not thin this out in any particular way other than just following the shape of the bear. So don't worry if your lines don't look exactly like mine. I just followed the outlines and what I had, and that helps me kind of see where things are. But that was really, we just need a coat of white. That's all we're worried about. All right, while I let this dry, I'm going to get a small brush. You can use a small flat or a small round, whatever makes sense for you. And I'm going to get black. Now with the black, I'm going to mix this black with just a little bit of this bright blue. And it's going to just kind of gray it a little bit, but I want this color to be just a little bit different than the background. So this is just a dark blue-gray. You can add a pinch of white in there if you want. Just the slightest difference. I don't even know that you'll be able to tell on camera. That's how close this color is. But in person, your eye picks up on that. So I'm gonna put my blue-gray for the nose. Right, and while this is wet, with a round brush, I'm just going to get a little bit of white and just pull a highlight on the outside of the nose. Just kind of follows the shape around. That helps us distinguish this really dark color from the background. And then I'm going to take some black paint and I'm going to paint in the eye again. So for placement for the eye, find your ear and find your nose. You want it to be about halfway. So your ear and your nose, eye about halfway. Okay, so right now I'm just gonna paint black ovals for those eyes. The eye for the larger polar bears is a little bit larger. The eye for the smaller polar bear, a little bit smaller. I've got a little black or a little canvas showing through on my black background, so I'm just touching that up while I see it. Which really isn't even that big of a deal because we're painting stars, so no worries. All right, I do want this white to be dry before I move on, so I'm going to leave that be for now. I'm going to grab a large flat brush, make sure it's clean. Down here at the bottom, there's a little bit of reflection from those northern lights. So I'm going to grab a little bit of green and just kind of bring it down here. Now, this is my phthalo green. I'm not adding any white to it. You can if you want to, but I would just be very light with it because this is in kind of the shadow area here. Of course, you want it to be light enough that you can see it, so just the tiniest pinch, tiny pinch of white. Clean off that brush. I'm going to do the same thing with my pink. Now the blue that we had down here was not really reflection from the northern lights so much as it was reflection from that moon. Again, I don't want a ton of white in here, just a little so you can see that pink. Oops. And in person, of course, these neon colors show up a lot better than on camera, but I'll go a little lighter so you can actually see what I'm doing up here. So you do not have to be as bright as me. It's kind of up to you. It's your preference how much of this you want to show up. All right, we need to add some shadowing on our bears. My bears are completely dry except for the eyes. If you need to dry your bears, go ahead and do that now. I'm going to zap the eyes just for a second, but it shouldn't take too long. All right, we're going to add shadow on these bears, and we're going to do that with blue. What I'm going to do is pull some water. I don't care that my water is milky and dirty. And my water's kind of blackish gray. No, not worried about that. I'm going to get some water over here, and I'm going to thin down this paint. I want it to be pretty runny. Okay. This is going to turn this paint into a light glaze. Runny like water. Okay, now I don't want a ton of this on my brush, but the first place I'm going to add this glaze is inside the ear. And that's because I don't care if this is nice and dark. So you can add a little bit of that inside the ear. And the trick with this, make sure there's not too much on your brush. Then I'm going to curve this glaze around the outside of the ear. All right. Both bears have a curve by their shoulder. So right under their ear, there's a line that comes down and kind of follows their body down here on both sides. So right behind their ear, there's kind of that fold there in their fur. So this creates a V or a triangle, and I'm going to add some of this glaze in there. There is a curve that starts right in front of their eye and goes downward. And then I'm going to put some blue shadowing up in the snout. So what I do to one bear, I need to do to the other, right? So there's this V shape right in here. So I'm going to add some of this blue glaze in here. Again, there's a curve that comes from the eye downward. And then you can add some shadow on the snooty snoot. And if at any point you kind of want to blend it out a little bit, you can use your finger for that. It doesn't have to be a perfect shadow. While this is wet, you can kind of blend it, which is kind of the cool thing about glaze. Now this eventually will dry, but you can always re-wet it if you want to. I'm going to add a little bit of this kind of right above the eye, just to show you, you can blend with your finger. And then I add a little more shadow kind of down in both corners. And here and there you can kind of blend in bands of shadow wherever you feel like there's not enough color, okay? So we want the majority of the shadow to be in the areas that I talked about, but you can always, dip in a little bit of blue. You can kind of blend this stuff out. It does not have to be perfect, and that's kind of why we went thin with the white to begin with. So there's a little bit of shadow that pokes through underneath anyway. That white is not completely clean, and then we add in this glaze. And you can kind of darken this glaze in certain parts, like where the deepest shadows are. Go ahead and go back in there with a deeper layer. So down in this corner would be a deeper layer, kind of in this V, it would be nice and shadowed. don't be afraid to play with a little bit of that blue here and there just to add some visual interest. Just make sure you don't lose your white. If you do, you can always, you know, come back through with layers of white in certain areas. So for example, here, I kind of want this to be nice and smooth, so I might add just kind of a white curve in here just to clean that up. But honestly, I'm pretty happy with my bears. I don't hate it. You can always work up, you know, your deeper shadows anywhere you want to with, you know, your blue. You can even add some, like here in the corner, undiluted blue. So right here, this is thick, this is not watered down. But I like to build up to that, right? Like I don't want to go too deep and too blue right off the bat, because then I can't, it's harder to pull it back. Yeah, I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty happy with this painting so far. Now, from here on out, it's finishing touches. So the last finishing touch I'm going to do is I'm going to add in some white of the stars. So I've got a round brush, and I'm just going to, anywhere I see black, I'm going to tap in different size stars. Now you can do this by using a paintbrush. If you have a paintbrush and you want to splatter, you can use an old toothbrush, and I actually did not grab one, but if we pretend this is an old toothbrush, thin down your white paint just a little bit, and you can brush your fingers right across those bristles, and that'll add some nice thin light splatter. But first, I'm going to tap in some bigger stars. While you're considering finishing touches, you can also look back at parts from the beginning and decide if you want to brighten up that Aurora at all. I like to add a couple stars up here just to give the idea that yes, you can see through this. The sky is not completely blocked out. All right, so I've got some bigger stars, and I didn't grab a toothbrush, but basically what you would do, so for my splatter, I'm going to get some white, thin it down a bit. I don't want too much on here, but you can just take it and pull. So whether or not you do this with a paintbrush or a toothbrush tends to add a little bit more. You just kind of splatter some stars. And so when you do the splatter in conjunction with the dots, you get some small, some large. Like right here, I got some paint splatter. I'm not crazy about that, but remember, you can hide anything with your black. So if you want to kind of get rid of some of that with your black, that's super easy to do. So this is pretty much it. These are finishing touches, so you can lighten your Aurora in any places that you want to. It's with the same technique you used to make it. If you want that a little brighter, just go ahead and add some white in there. I did a lot of that in my sample, made it really light. Totally your call. And then when you are finished, sign your name at the bottom, make it yours. And that is it. That's all I have for you today. I hope that you will consider sharing with me. You can do that by joining my Facebook group. It is completely free. I will put the address down here on the screen. It's facebook.com/groups/paint, rinse, repeat. You can join the group. It's a bunch of like-minded artists who will cheer you on. And I would love to see your Arctic Aurora polar bears. So please consider joining the group there. You can also share by tagging me on the socials at Paint, Rinse, Repeat or hashtag Paint, Rinse, Repeat, and I will find it and love it. So however is more convenient for you to share, I would love to see your painting. I also would love to give a shout out to my supporters. My supporters are a membership, so they get everything that I plan each and every month for only $9.99. It is a huge bargain. Sometimes they get 6 or 7 paintings to choose from. They can participate in everything or just pick and choose what they like. It's basically the same cost as one class, so it's a great deal. I would love for you to consider that. You can find that on my Facebook page. It's all run through Facebook, so there's no other website you have to worry about. The address is there on the screen, facebook.com/become supporter/paint, rinse, repeat online, or you can just go to my Facebook page and look for information. I would love to welcome you to my supporters membership. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining, and I will see you next time. Stay creative, everyone.